In this episode, we're going to take a phrase that gets used constantly in cybersecurity and strip it down to something clear and practical. Zero trust is often presented as a product, a marketing slogan, or an abstract philosophy, but at its core it is a mindset about how to design and operate networks. Instead of assuming that anything inside a network boundary is automatically safe, zero trust assumes that no user, device, or system should be trusted without verification. That does not mean you trust nothing at all. It means trust is earned continuously and in context. For beginners, the most important shift is understanding that traditional network design often relied on a strong outer perimeter and softer internal controls. Zero trust challenges that model by questioning whether location alone should determine trust. Once you see that shift, the rest of the concept becomes easier to follow. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Historically, many networks were designed with a castle-and-moat approach. The outer firewall acted like a protective wall, and once inside, devices could often communicate freely with each other. This model worked reasonably well when most systems were on-premises and most users were physically inside the building. However, modern environments include remote users, cloud workloads, third-party integrations, and mobile devices that blur the idea of inside versus outside. Attackers also evolved, focusing on phishing and credential theft to gain access through legitimate-looking pathways. If an attacker compromises a user account, the traditional model may treat that account as trusted simply because it is inside the network. Zero trust responds to this reality by saying that being inside the network is not enough to grant broad access. Trust must be evaluated at each access request. At a high level, zero trust is built on three guiding ideas: verify explicitly, use least privilege, and assume breach. Verify explicitly means that every access request should be evaluated based on multiple signals, such as user identity, device health, location, and risk context. Use least privilege means granting only the minimum access necessary for a specific role or task. Assume breach means designing systems with the expectation that some part of the environment may already be compromised. These ideas are not tied to a single product or technology. They are architectural principles that influence how you configure identity systems, network segmentation, remote access, and monitoring. For a beginner, it helps to see zero trust not as a new network, but as a new way of thinking about access decisions. One of the foundational elements of zero trust is strong identity. Instead of relying primarily on network location, access decisions are based on who the user is and what device they are using. This requires reliable authentication methods, often including multi-factor authentication, MFA, and centralized identity providers. When a user attempts to access a resource, the system evaluates their credentials and may also check the health or compliance status of their device. For example, a device that lacks required security updates may be restricted or denied access. The key concept is that identity and device posture become primary signals, rather than the assumption that internal network access equals trust. This shift reduces the risk that stolen credentials alone can provide broad access. Network segmentation plays a major role in operationalizing zero trust. Even after a user is authenticated, they should not automatically gain access to all internal systems. Instead, access should be limited to specific applications or services based on role. Internal firewalls and access control rules enforce these boundaries, ensuring that a compromised account cannot easily move laterally across the environment. In a zero-trust design, internal communication paths are deliberately restricted, not wide open. This aligns with the idea of minimizing blast radius, which limits the impact of a single compromised system or credential. When segmentation and identity-based policies work together, access becomes granular rather than broad. Another important component is continuous evaluation. Zero trust is not a one-time check at login. It can involve ongoing assessment of risk signals during a session. If unusual behavior is detected, such as access from an unexpected geographic region or sudden privilege escalation. The system may require re-authentication or restrict access. This dynamic approach reflects the assumption that risk can change over time. It also recognizes that attackers may attempt to blend in after initial access. Continuous monitoring and adaptive controls help ensure that trust is not static. For beginners, this means understanding that zero trust treats trust as temporary and conditional, not permanent. Encryption is also central to zero trust principles. Even internal traffic between services should be protected because the model assumes that internal networks may not be inherently safe. Encrypting communication between systems prevents attackers from easily intercepting sensitive data if they gain a foothold. This practice aligns with the broader theme that trust boundaries should not be defined solely by physical or logical network location. By protecting data in transit, organizations reduce the risk that internal compromise leads to widespread data exposure. Encryption, combined with authentication and authorization, reinforces the layered nature of zero trust. It is helpful to differentiate zero trust from simply deploying a VPN or adding a firewall. A VPN extends network access, but it may still grant broad internal connectivity once connected. Zero trust, in contrast, aims to grant access only to specific resources rather than the entire network. Firewalls enforce boundaries, but zero trust often requires more granular, identity-aware decisions than simple network rules. In many implementations, users connect to specific applications through controlled gateways instead of gaining full network access. This application-centric model reduces exposure and aligns access more closely with job responsibilities. The difference is subtle but important. Zero trust focuses on resource-level access rather than network-level presence. Operationalizing zero trust also involves cultural and procedural changes, not just technical controls. Administrators must be disciplined about defining roles, reviewing permissions, and removing unnecessary access. Systems must be inventoried so that sensitive assets are clearly identified and protected. Logging and monitoring must be robust to detect anomalous behavior quickly. Without these operational practices, technical tools cannot deliver the intended security benefits. Zero trust is therefore as much about governance and maintenance as it is about architecture. Beginners should recognize that no technology can enforce good policy if the underlying access decisions are poorly defined. One challenge in implementing zero trust is balancing security with usability. If access controls are too rigid or too frequently disruptive, users may become frustrated and seek workarounds. Effective design uses risk-based policies that adjust requirements according to context. For example, a low-risk action from a known device may require fewer steps than a high-risk action from an unfamiliar location. This adaptive approach maintains security while preserving productivity. It also reinforces the principle that trust decisions are contextual rather than static. Thoughtful design ensures that security measures support business goals instead of obstructing them unnecessarily. Cloud environments have accelerated the adoption of zero-trust thinking. Because cloud workloads may reside outside traditional data centers, the concept of a clear internal perimeter becomes less meaningful. Access to cloud resources is typically mediated by identity systems and role-based policies rather than network location alone. This naturally aligns with zero-trust principles. Even within cloud platforms, segmentation and encryption remain essential to limit lateral movement. The environment may be virtual, but the need for defined trust boundaries remains the same. Understanding zero trust in cloud contexts reinforces that the philosophy applies regardless of physical location. A frequent misconception is that zero trust means trusting nothing at all, which can sound impractical or extreme. In reality, zero trust means avoiding implicit trust and requiring verification before granting access. It is not about eliminating trust entirely. It is about making trust explicit and conditional. Another misconception is that adopting zero trust requires replacing all existing infrastructure overnight. In practice, organizations often move gradually by strengthening identity controls, refining segmentation, and improving monitoring. Zero trust is a journey of incremental improvements rather than a single switch to flip. Recognizing this helps beginners see it as achievable rather than overwhelming. As you reinforce these ideas, visualize a network where every access request passes through a checkpoint that evaluates identity, device posture, and role. No area is automatically safe simply because it is internal. Communication between services is encrypted and authorized. Access to applications is granted narrowly and reviewed regularly. Monitoring systems watch for deviations from expected patterns. This mental image captures the essence of operationalized zero trust. It is not about distrust for its own sake. It is about disciplined verification and controlled access. In conclusion, operationalizing zero trust in modern network security and architecture means redesigning how trust is granted and maintained. Instead of relying on a strong outer perimeter and broad internal access, zero trust emphasizes explicit verification, least privilege, and continuous evaluation. Identity, segmentation, encryption, and monitoring work together to enforce granular access decisions. The goal is to reduce the impact of compromised credentials or devices by limiting what they can reach. When you understand zero trust as a practical framework for access control rather than a buzzword, you gain a powerful lens for evaluating modern security architecture. That lens will continue to guide how we think about identity, access management, and defensive strategy in the episodes ahead.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.